very kind of you. Thank you. You've had your breakfast. Now I'm going to bore you stupid. That's all right, isn't it? So my story begins with my grandfather, who was a famous Christian evangelist. Unfortunately, he died before I was born. But I was brought up in a big family, in a very Christian family. Went to Sunday school. Did all that. Had a faith as a young lad. I wasn't baptized, but I think it would have been impossible for me not to have some sort of faith, being brought up in my family. But I fast forward. I went to university. I was a rugby player. I was just getting on with my life without any Christian input at all, really, other than when I went home at Christmas and stuff. And after university and working on a local paper for a few years, I ended up working at the Sun newspaper. So you can leave now if you want. I don't do these talks in Liverpool because they don't like the Sun. And that's a crazy, sometimes wonderful, sometimes terrifying place to work. And we had the editor before, when I started, for example, see how crazy they were. He got a complaint from a couple that read the horoscopes religiously, and they'd noticed that the guy doing the horoscopes was cutting and pasting from different months. So the editor had this looked into, and turned out it was true. They were just conning. So he wrote the astronomer a letter saying, "As you will already know, you're fired." It didn't pull punches there. I remember one of the early jobs I had to do. If you remember the comedian Spike Milligan, I had to go and knock on his door to ask him about his love child. I will get more religious as this goes on, but I can't hide my past. So I knocked on the door in his little house down in Rye in Sussex. He opened the door, could see his head. He said, "Hello, I'm Duncan Larcombe, I'm from the Sun." And without any pause, he said, "In that case, welcome to Earth," and slammed the door. Not my best interview, but actually not my worst. It was a crazy place to work. Amongst the highlights of my career, when the new Doctor Who series came out, with Christopher Eccleston and Billy Piper, and it'd been off air for years, suddenly came back, and for some copyright row, they weren't allowed Daleks. And Doctor Who without Daleks, I mean, it's not Doctor Who, is it? So the Sun naturally launched a campaign to bring back the Daleks to Doctor Who, which involved my editor, Rebecca Brooks, at the time, buying an original gold Dalek from the 1970s that had actually been in the show. And I was given the task of, at all costs, get this Dalek on the set where they're filming the new series. So I rented a transit van. The series was being filmed right down in Cardiff in Wales, so I set off at about 6 o'clock in the morning with this Dalek in the back of the transit van. Thought no more of it. Then I found out on the way down that the filming didn't start till 7:30 that evening in Cardiff, so I thought, I've got a whole day to spare. Well, I went to university in Wales, so I rang an old mate of mine who was a farmer who I lived with for a while. And I said, "Rich, I've got the day to kill in Wales. What are you up to?" He said, I'm not going to do his accent. I'm in Bilth, Wales at the Royal Welsh Show. And if you want, you come down, meet me by the gate. I've got a pass, and you can bring the van in, or the car in, or whatever. I swear I didn't tell him what I was doing. I just turned up, and we were queuing. And I said to Rich, he'd hopped in with me. What's all the fuss? He goes, "Well, the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh are here today at the Royal Welsh Show, so security's quite tight." And I thought, I think we might have a bit of a problem on our hands. And I'll never forget it, but we got to, when it was our turn, this security guard, this Welshman, and I do apologise, I'm quoting him, I know it's not the appropriate place to say this, but he said, "Don't mind if I look in the back?" I said, No. So he slid the door of the thing open to be confronted by this Dalek with its sucker and he said, "Jesus Christ, boy, you're not going to exterminate the Queen, are you?" Apologies for that blasphemy, but stuck in my mind. The Sun was obviously famous for its headlines. My personal favourite one, again, this is not appropriate given our location, but I'll do it anyway. It was when George Michael was caught in a toilet in LA by an undercover policeman. And I don't know, do any of you remember the headline? Yeah, "Zip me up before you go," which I think said it in one bit. Not my story, by the way. And on my own stories, I remember I worked for a bit as a defense editor. So I was writing about the war in Afghanistan, and a chap got in touch who'd invented these boxer short type things that had Kevlar in them. And he was telling me that they were proving very popular amongst the wives and girlfriends of the soldiers that were bravely going out to Afghanistan and in danger of the IEDs. So I wrote the story, and the subs on the Sun, they come up with the headlines. I can't claim credit for them, but I wrote the story, and the next day I got the paper, and the headline read, "Saving Ryan's Privates." So I thought I claim that as my own, but not anymore. I covered the Soham murders and got to meet the school caretaker because our press conferences were all held inside the school hall, and obviously he turned out to be Ian Huntley, the murderer of Holly Wales and Jessica Chapman. So that was a tough job, slightly more serious than the Dalek exercise, but there we are. I had 4 trips to Afghanistan, which I won't really dwell on much today, because there was one story that really stood out, or one assignment that really stood out for me, and this is where this starts coming back towards my faith. I was sent out to cover the Boxing Day tsunami in 2004. Me and a young photographer went 2 hours north of Phuket in Thailand to really see and assess how bad the situation was up the coast at some of the resorts. And we went down into down a hill towards a low-lying, what was a town, a place called Koh Lak. And it was dusk and it was dusty. And earlier that day, I'd left messages for all the people who were posting on the boards in the middle of Phuket, missing Brit, the phone number. I'd left messages for lots of the numbers on there that were British, thought no more of it. But in the dust and the dark, I could see clothes. It looked like somebody's suitcase had burst on the motorway and they were just lying around. And as we got closer, I realised that they were actually bodies, and lots of bodies. And there was a Toyota Hilux pickup truck lifting up the bodies, putting them on carefully on the top. There were no emergency services had reached that far north at that time. So I said to the taxi driver, right, follow these vehicles, let's see where they're taking the bodies. And so we did that, and we pulled down this country track into what I imagine was a sort of football pitch, an open, flat bit of grassland. And there was a man with a clipboard there signing in, basically keeping count of all the numbers. And I got out and asked him how many he had on his list. And he said it was 5,500 bodies. And the bodies were laid out in rows. They had about 200 coffins. They had about 1,000 tarpaulins, bodies wrapped in tarpaulins, and then the rest were just there lying side by side. And it was the smell I'll never forget. The sight, I think it was like gazing into hell. And I was standing there trying to take it all in, and suddenly my phone rang. And I answered it, and there was an elderly sounding gentleman on the phone saying, "Oh, you rang me to say that you're out in Thailand. I can't get hold of my son." And so I said to him, "Oh, okay." I was quite keen to get him off the phone because I wanted to be able to help him. So I kind of said, "Look, I'm going to the British Embassy tomorrow morning. I'll make some inquiries for you. Where was your son staying? So he put the phone down. I heard him rustle some papers, and he came back and he said, he's in a place called Colac. And his son was one of the dead. We'd found out a couple of days later. But at that instant, all these bodies just turned into human beings for me. Turned into people's sons, their daughters, their babies. And I found that profoundly difficult because I was brought up to believe in a God that loved us, a Jesus that died for us, God of love, and it really threw me way away. I suddenly became, over the next few years, a gradual cynicism, and I was quite critical of my brothers and sisters who were all Christians. I felt like the black sheep of the family left out because I wasn't the one that was saying grace and going to church at Christmas and stuff when I was at home. So that was difficult. But meanwhile, I got the job just not long after that, doing the royal job at the Sun. One of the first stories I wrote, we went to meet a young lad who had 12 pictures and the old happy snaps. You remember when you didn't have them on your phone? 12 pictures, and he said, he'd phoned the Sun to say, look, I've got pictures of Prince William in a gorilla outfit. Would that be any good? Of course, the Sun's saying, yeah. So we went to meet him. He flicked through the album, the 12 pictures, but we got all the William ones off him, and it didn't show William's face. So how can we run that? It doesn't matter. And so he was a bit disappointed. He said, what about a picture of Harry, his brother? I said, yeah, well, what was he wearing? He said, and it was the last frame he had. He handed me the picture, and it was Harry wearing the Afrika Korps Nazi uniform with the swastika on his arm, cigarette and a glass of beer in the other hand. And we ran that story. And it was big. So I got into doing the royal job, got to know William and Harry quite well. Everything was going fantastic for me. I'd had my time in Afghanistan, and that I'd survived it and made some great friends along the way. By 2011, I was flying high. I'd been given a job as well as working at the Sun. I was working as a royal correspondent for ABC's Good Morning America. So I was earning 2 salaries, and it was fantastic. And then in April 2012, at 6 o'clock in the morning, there was a bang at my door. The dog barked. And I looked out over the window, over the door, and on my drive were 8 plainclothes policemen. And they'd come to arrest me, not for phone hacking, but as a result of the phone hacking scandal, my company had handed over details of contacts that had been paid for stories that were also public officials. 7 years earlier, a guy had phoned the Sun, and he worked as a staff sergeant at Sandhurst, and so he was referred on to me, and he said, I'll only give you good stories about the boys, but I'm willing to tell stories to you. So we worked with him, and that was why I was arrested. I was taken to Bromley Police Station, put in a cell for 5.5 hours. Then I was interviewed under caution for 7.5 hours. I was told by my lawyers to go no comment, which still gives me the shivers when you see that on TV now, in dramas and stuff. And I was saying no comment so many times for such a long time that even when they asked me if I wanted a cup of tea in the break, I said no comment. It was just mind-boggling. And it was a terrifying time. Up until that time, one of my best friends had been alcohol. I'd drunk my way through the tsunami, comforted myself. I'd drunk with the princes, and that was something that endeared me to them, the fact that I was slightly more laid back than other journalists. And I'd spent long lunches with contacts that had ended up giving me stories because we'd had such a laugh one afternoon. Alcohol was my friend, or so I thought. But after my arrest, I was actually held on police bail for 3.5 years, suspended from work, and feeling sorry for myself, but being paid, so I just self-medicated and drank and drank and drank every single day, most mornings, to be honest. And during that time, I went up to the office and things were really getting on top of me. I was looking at potential 2-year prison sentence. I was definitely guilty if it was a crime. And I came home from London. I'd had a lot of vodka. I went to we had an outhouse. I went in the outhouse and I took the petrol can that I used for my lawnmower and I poured petrol all over me. And luckily, my wife opened the barn door. She saw me go in there. Well, she'd heard me and she stopped me. But I did have a cigarette lighter in my hand. I'll never know whether I would have gone through with it or not. You don't. But it was a moment of probably a turning point for me. It didn't make me any better, but I did start seeking help. But I kept drinking. At the Old Bailey, Court 16 of the Old Bailey, if you're going to go on trial, go to the Old Bailey. It's bragging rights. It's quite, it's where the worst people go, and me. So, we 3.5-month trial. The jury just thought it was ridiculous. My defence was, yeah, I did that, but so what? And I got acquitted. In fact, we all got acquitted. Every single journalist that was arrested under Operation Elvedon, the Met Police's biggest ever inquiry into police inquiry and most expensive, every single journalist walked free from court. Such was the political nature of it. But that's not why I'm here to talk to you about today. I was acquitted, but if you've spent 3.5 years of your life drinking, you can't just stop. I mean, I was in a mess. My career was really damaged because I'd spent so long out of the game. All my contacts that I had, the police had contacted and they wouldn't speak to me anymore. So I was in a mess and I left the Sun. I did write a book about Prince Harry, which sold well across the world. But I wrote most of that when I was drunk, to be honest. Alcohol had just become part of my life. And if I fast forward 2 or 3 years on from that, I was in a mess, and my wife managed to get me into the Priory for rehab. And wow, that was the beginning, really, of my life changing. I was an angry, bitter, drunk, opinionated has-been, really, who'd been really horrible to his brothers and sisters about God, and wouldn't set foot in the church unless, I just wouldn't have done it. But I was introduced to the 12 Steps of Recovery, which was originally a Christian program. And through that, went to a recovery course that my brother was running in Tunbridge Baptist Church. So I actually thought, I was so broken, I thought, I'll go to the church. And it introduced me, to my astonishment, really, looking at the Bible, the scriptures, looking at the New Testament and the words of Jesus. These were a way of life which was absolutely identical to the 12 steps of recovery, the notion of accepting that we're not in control of our own lives, accepting that there is a higher power in Jesus Christ, and handing our lives over to him and trusting with him, making daily amends. The whole process is there in the most successful rehabilitation tool, if you like, used all around the world, all the very best clinics. They get it all from Jesus. I tell you, if you go to AA meetings, you meet people that are Christian that don't even realize that they are, because they've substituted their higher power for a group of drunks or whatever it is. And I found that profoundly spiritual. And my mum died, and seeing her on her deathbed, she was a wonderfully Christian woman, a Christian writer and author, absolutely excited about the prospect of dying and going to heaven. And it was really to see the peace that she was in her last hours was the thing that really kind of pushed me luckily over the edge, this time the good edge, not the bad edge. And I decided I just listened to some Christian music in my room and my headphones on, and out of nowhere found myself falling to my knees in tears and just asked Jesus to come into my life, come back. And when I reflect on my life and my career, the times when I was in Afghanistan, the times when I was with a cigarette lighter in my hand, and the times when I was on trial at the Old Bailey, I realized that God was with me the whole time. You know, and I thought I was miles away from him. The guy was breathing down my neck. Say the guy, you know what I mean? My God, Jesus. And yeah, so since then I've been baptized. My life's not perfect. I still have problems like everybody else, but I've had some peace, and the anger has been lifted from me. I've been treated for PTSD, and really that has helped me no end. And so I would encourage anybody that thinks that living life without God is an option. It isn't. He's with you. He's with you whether you realize it or not. And the time I think I was probably furthest away from God was when I was flying high and I had 2 jobs and thought I was amazing. And that's complacency, I think, is what drives a lot of people away from God. But you know, that's my story. I'm still growing as a Christian. I'm still trying hard. I'm still going to church, and I'm still reading the Bible. But the Bible is just this wonderful love letter, which just speaks of solutions. It doesn't talk about problems. It talks about solutions and the love of Jesus and the fruits of the Spirit. So I'll open the floor to any questions if there are any. But thank you very much for listening. Yeah. Thank you. You're not allowed to ask me about page 3, girls, so okay? Not inside here anyway. Well, it's still there. When I started it, it had 9.2 million readers a day. It now has about 1.2 million. People just don't buy it. People don't buy papers. I work as a van driver at the moment, and in the old days, every van would have had a copy of The Sun in it. None now. It's online. The website gets a lot of traffic, but it's run by kids. So it's not. The newspapers have lost their bite, and I noticed that there's a new drama series coming out this month about the phone hacking scandal, and I'm sure that's going to depict them as these powerful institutions. They're not anymore. They're not. The Sun's irrelevant. Social media has overtaken it. Yeah, I mean, headlines do. More papers are sued because of headlines than actual stories, and that's because context is important, and it shouldn't happen. And back in the day when I was a royal editor of the paper, if they would show me the headline before it goes in, because what if that upsets the palace? What if that's so there should be the discussion between the subs. But I don't know, I think on political things you can weave and spin and mislead people. I was never a political reporter, probably for that reason. But I think in news, actual raw news, it's hard to manipulate the stories of 2 young girls being murdered by their caretaker, avoid reading the political stuff, because you're probably being fed something. But yeah, I hope that answers the question. I'm not sure. Yeah, and that will probably be stories about Peter Mandelson or, Keir Starmer, because the Mirror's a Labour paper, the Sun's a Tory paper. It's coming a Reform paper pretty quickly, actually. It'll change its colours, whatever. Yeah. No, sadly, when I was in the Priory, she decided to throw me out for good. And she divorced me. Um, but strangely now, I'm a much calmer person, and um, I think we probably are better off apart. She's not a Christian. I pray for her a lot. We get on well. Strangest thing to say, but if you really want to get on well with your wife, divorce her. That's what I found. But I'm probably not going to get Dear Deirdre's job if I come out with stuff like that. Yeah, but no, she put up with so much, and most importantly, we've got 2 daughters, and we work really hard together to keep them safe and to keep them okay. Yeah, I wrote a book last year, came out, called The Scum I've Become, which was a kind of confess all stuff. And I wrote a book that came out earlier this year called My Raw Scandal. The 2 of those are sort of the detailed, it's like I've skimmed through that for the talk today. And they're available on Kindle via Amazon. They're not in hard copy yet, but I'm hoping they'll come out in hard copy. I want to write about my journey with the faith bit in it, yeah, and to talk about the moments in my life when God was there and I didn't even realise it, yeah. Bit of both, but yeah, I mean, I played football against Harry. I taught Harry how to do a flaming sambuca out of his kneeling on the floor. He once made me. He said he'd only talk to me if he was as drunk as I was, if I was as drunk as he was, and he had a funnel and a pipe, and he poured in 2 pints of cider as I was on my knees. So I was very nearly sick on Prince Harry's legs. Um, but yeah, no, we got on all right. I mean, he's definitely changed since he's met Meghan, and he's turned acidic towards the media, which I think is a great shame, because we loved him, and our readers absolutely adored him. If Harry got naked and played pool, our readers thought good on him. If he wore a Nazi outfit, frankly, I think a lot of people were defending him, saying he's just a young lad who's just done something stupid. Now Harry gets criticised for the smallest things. Yeah, the good edge, yes. I don't know. I mean, I even in the Priory, I never set out and thought what I need is God. I never had that point in my life where I thought I need God. But I just became overwhelmed with the chaos that I was living in. It felt like I was in a storm on a ship, and the best thing I could do is hold on to the side of it. My mental health was all over the place. My drinking was out of control. And I personally believe that with my brothers and sisters praying like crazy for me, and the people I'd met on the recovery course praying like crazy for me, I just think God softened my heart. I think. Well, when I was listening to this Christian music on my headphones in my bedroom, and I just collapsed in tears on the floor, I knew that wasn't me. That was something. That was an incredible moment for me, very personal, but, I do think God can do that. I don't think he has to, but I think that he can reach the hardened souls. Can I tell you, have I got time to just tell you quickly what happened there? Yeah, so after my incident, I drove it to the middle of Cardiff where they were filming, and they had a London bus which they were filming at, and it was all cordoned off. But the middle of Cardiff, there are about 200 people watching from the sides. And I got a little photographer to sit in the Dalek. It has a lever on it, but this was broken. There was no motor, and there was no brake. And so we pushed the Dalek with the Sun logo on it stuck to the front of it, pushed it towards this bus, London bus, and it was on a slight incline. It wasn't a steep hill, but it and it got faster and faster and faster, and the crowd saw it and started cheering. And then the police that were there, these two policemen kind of came, and it was like 10-pin bowling nearly. They didn't know if there was anyone in it. They didn't. What is it, Dalek? And so what we did was it basically just drove into the back of the bus, and we got the photos we were after. It was perfect. The police then came and dragged it back up to where we were laughing our heads off. And I took it into a bar, and I thought, right, this is this is a famous fallen idol. So we put it on a bar, lined up a whole load of half-drunk beers, did pictures of it drowning its sorrows. Then we took it to a lap dancing bar and had the ladies dancing around it, trying to do a kind of Wayne Rooney type thing. And then the last picture we got, we put it half on the curb, half off, and sellotaped a kebab to its sucker. And when I woke up in the morning, I got a call from the deputy editor saying, "What have you done?" Because that was brilliant. We're all laughing our heads off. So, yeah, we got a bit carried away. I love that, Dalek. Thanks for asking me that. Okay. Tom Rees. And he used to run Hildenborough Hall, which was one of the original sort of retreats for Christian families and stuff. And he died in 1969, but he was like a British Billy Graham, and he was a mentor to Billy Graham. Yeah, but as I say, I never met him, so yeah, I would have loved to have had some time with him. Okay, Steve. I like that question because it was one of my theories. I think some Christians believe that there are Christians and then there are bad people, and there's no difference between the two. The reality is there's good in everybody, nearly everybody. And I used to think that, you have to do the job as ethically and as well as you can. I was dealing with people whose children had died, some real heart-wrenching moments that you just have to do the job as honestly and with as much integrity as you can. Not all my colleagues followed that mantra, but then I think you could be a double glazing salesman and hit your targets by selling to deaf people. That's our challenge in daily life. I think for me, being a Christian isn't suddenly now I'm a certified good person. In fact, far from it. I'm not. I'm a certified sinner. But my guidance now is guidance from the Bible rather than my own sort of moral compass. I hope that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Oh, one more. Yeah. It can be done. People can beat addiction, but as you'll know, the first step is the admission. And without that, no one will recover from any addiction. So whatever method they use, they'll have to do step one. Because if you're in denial, there's no hope for you. That's the tragic part of it. I know people that have done the 12 steps and have relapsed, and you know, so it doesn't always work, but if you stick to it, it can. If it were a miracle cure, they'd sell it, wouldn't they? Yeah. Cool. Oh, I suppose interesting coming up to Bradford. This is great. I'll have an interesting drive home as well, no doubt. Thank you very much for listening, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you.